The year is 476 AD. In the palace of Ravenna, a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer stands before the last Roman emperor of the West. Romulus Augustulus, a boy of barely 16, trembles as his crown is lifted from his head. The Western Roman Empire dies not with the clash of swords, but with the quiet surrender of a child. This moment changed everything. But what if it never happened? What if, instead of collapse, Rome found renewal? What if the empire that once stretched from Britain to Baghdad continued its march through centuries, through millennia? What if the greatest civilization the world had ever known never fell? Tonight, we explore a world where Roman legions never retreated, where Latin remained the language of progress, where the eagle standards still cast shadows across continents. This is the story of an empire eternal. To understand what might have been, we must first grasp what Rome truly was. This was not merely a nation. It was a machine of assimilation, adaptation, and expansion that had already survived 800 years by the time of its supposed fall. The Roman system possessed something unique in the ancient world: the ability to transform enemies into citizens, barbarians into Romans. Their roads didn't just carry armies, they carried ideas, trade, and identity. Their aqueducts didn't just bring water, they brought the promise that Roman civilization could bloom anywhere. The empire had survived civil wars that tore it in half. It had weathered invasions by Gauls, Germans, and Persians. It had adapted to new religions, new technologies, new challenges. The Roman military wasn't just disciplined, it was evolutionary, constantly learning from defeats and victories alike. But by 476 AD, cracks had formed. Economic inflation devastated the currency. Barbarian tribes pressed against overstretched borders. Political instability weakened central authority. The empire that had once seemed invincible appeared to be dying from within. Yet empires don't die overnight. They transform. And in our alternative timeline, transformation becomes salvation. Imagine the crisis of 476 AD met not with surrender, but with renaissance. Picture Emperor Romulus Augustulus, rather than abdicating, rallying the remaining Roman forces. Envision a brilliant military mind emerging. Perhaps a forgotten general, perhaps a returned exile, who understands that Rome's strength was never in its armies alone, but in its ability to make Romans out of anyone. Instead of fighting the Germanic tribes, this new leadership embraces them fully, not as foederati, unreliable allied troops, but as full Roman citizens with stakes in the empire's future. The Ostrogoths, Visigoths, and Vandals don't carve up Roman territory. They become Roman territory. This reconstituted empire implements radical reforms. The military adopts the superior cavalry tactics of its new Germanic citizens while maintaining Roman discipline and engineering. The economy stabilizes through controlled debasement and the integration of new agricultural techniques from across the known world. Most crucially, the empire decentralizes without fragmenting. Regional governors gain autonomy while remaining bound to Rome through shared law, shared language, and shared ambition. The empire becomes a federation, flexible enough to bend without breaking. By 600 AD, this Neo-Roman Empire has not merely survived, it has thrived. The reconquest begins methodically. Roman legions, now including Germanic cavalry and Hunnic horse archers, sweep back across former territories. But they don't come as conquerors, they come as liberators, offering the stability and prosperity that the post-Roman kingdoms had failed to provide. Britain welcomes Roman rule back as protection against Saxon raiders, Gaul embraces Roman law as preferable to Frankish feudalism. Spain opens its gates to escape Visigothic infighting. Within a century, the Mediterranean is once again a Roman lake. But this Rome looks beyond its ancient borders. Viking raids from the north meet Roman fleets equipped with Greek fire and superior tactics. The Islamic expansion of the 7th century encounters not a weakened Byzantine rump state, but a united Roman Empire stretching from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. The technological implications are staggering. Roman engineering, with 1,000 additional years of development, produces marvels that dwarf the original aqueducts and roads. Concrete that self-heals, roads that last millennia, heating systems that warm entire cities. The Romans, who had already mastered steam power in primitive forms, might have achieved mechanization centuries before our timeline's industrial revolution. By 1000 AD, the world map looks radically different. The Roman Empire spans 4 continents. Roman expeditions have reached India and China, not as traders, but as explorers seeking new provinces. The Americas, encountered by Roman navigators following North African trade routes, become the empire's newest territories: Provincia Atlantica and Provincia Pacifica. Latin has evolved, but remains the lingua franca from Hadrian's Wall to the Sahara Desert. Roman law, refined over 15 centuries, provides the legal framework for a quarter of humanity. Roman citizenship means something profound: membership in the most successful civilization in human history. The technological acceleration continues. Roman scholars, with access to knowledge from across the known world, make breakthroughs in mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy. The Islamic Golden Age occurs within Roman borders, as Muslim scholars contribute to Roman universities from Cordoba to Constantinople. But the greatest change is cultural. Christianity, having developed within Roman protection rather than Roman persecution, evolves differently. The Pope remains the Bishop of Rome, but Rome remains the capital of an empire, not just a faith. Religious and secular authority balance each other, preventing the extremes of both theocracy and paganism. The Renaissance happens 5 centuries early, with Roman libraries intact and Roman universities functioning continuously. Classical knowledge never needs to be rediscovered. Instead, it builds upon itself generation after generation. By 1200 AD, Roman scholars are debating heliocentric models not as revolutionary theories, but as logical progressions of accumulated wisdom. The printing press, invented in Roman workshops, spreads Latin texts across the empire faster than manuscripts ever could. But these aren't copies of ancient wisdom. They're reports of new discoveries, new inventions, new frontiers. Roman roads, maintained and improved over centuries, create trade networks that span continents. A merchant in Roman Britain can ship goods to Roman California via Roman Egypt and Roman India. The economic integration makes regional conflicts self-defeating. Everyone prospers more through cooperation than conquest. Political evolution matches technological advancement. The Roman Senate, reinvigorated by representatives from across the expanded empire, develops into something resembling a proto-democratic legislature. Citizenship remains earned rather than inherited, but the paths to citizenship multiply. Merit, service, and loyalty matter more than birth or wealth. By 1500 AD, when our timeline sees European exploration of the New World, the Roman world already stretches across it. Roman cities dot the American coastlines. Roman law governs lands from Alaska to Argentina. The indigenous peoples, rather than facing conquest and disease, have been gradually integrated into the Roman system over centuries. Some resist, some collaborate, some transform into something new. Roman in law and loyalty, native in culture and custom. The Protestant Reformation never happens, not because reform is impossible, but because the Roman Catholic Church, competing with other faiths within the same empire, has already reformed itself. Religious tolerance becomes practical necessity in an empire spanning every climate, every culture, every creed. Science accelerates beyond recognition. Roman scholars, with specimens and observations from 6 continents, develop sophisticated theories of biology, geology, and astronomy. The steam engine appears in Roman workshops by 1400. The telegraph connects Roman provinces by 1600. But the greatest achievement isn't technological, it's organizational. An empire governing perhaps 200 million people across 6 continents requires administrative innovations that surpass anything in our timeline. Roman bureaucracy, already legendary, evolves into something approaching modern efficiency. Communication networks span the globe. Legal systems adapt to local conditions while maintaining universal principles. Yet even this eternal empire faces challenges. Success breeds complacency. Vast territories strain even the most efficient administration. New technologies create new social tensions. Subject peoples, no matter how well treated, sometimes prefer independence to integration. The very size that makes Rome invincible also makes it vulnerable to internal contradictions. Religious tensions simmer despite official tolerance. Economic inequality persists despite unprecedented prosperity. Regional governors, governing territories larger than ancient empires, sometimes forget their loyalty to distant Rome. The Senate, representing constituencies across the world, struggles to find common ground between Roman Britain and Roman China. Most dangerously, the empire's success might inspire its own transformation. When Roman law governs the world, when Roman citizenship is global, when Roman culture has absorbed every other culture, what makes Rome special? Does universal empire eventually become no empire at all? Picture our world today with Roman eyes. A globe where Latin names mark every major city, where Roman law provides the foundation for international justice, where Roman roads, evolved into highways and railways and fiber optic networks, still connect the world, where Roman citizenship means membership in the oldest, most successful continuous government in human history. This is a world without the Dark Ages, because knowledge never retreated. Without the devastating religious wars of early modern Europe, because religious diversity was managed within imperial unity. Without the colonial period as we know it, because Rome expanded through integration rather than exploitation. The Industrial Revolution happens earlier, but spreads more evenly. Democracy develops gradually within imperial structures, rather than explosively against them. Science advances faster because scholars from every continent collaborate within the same legal and linguistic framework. But it's also a world without the nation-states that gave us Shakespeare's English, Dante's Italian, or Cervantes' Spanish. Without the competitive pressure that drove European innovation, without the cultural diversity that comes from true independence. Whether this alternative world is better or worse depends on what we value most: unity or diversity, stability or dynamism, the peace of empire or the vitality of independence. The Roman Empire never fell because empires, like rivers, don't simply stop. They transform, adapt, and find new paths forward. In our timeline, That transformation meant fragmentation. The Roman legacy lived on in the Byzantine Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, the Catholic Church, and the countless legal systems, architectural styles, and governmental structures that still bear Roman fingerprints. But what if the transformation had meant integration instead of fragmentation? What if Rome had solved the problems that destroyed it, rather than succumbing to them? What if the greatest political achievement in human history had been not Rome's peak, but Rome's permanence? The eternal empire remains a dream because empires, no matter how mighty, carry within them the seeds of their own transformation. The question isn't whether they change, but how. And that raises our next question. What if China had never been divided? What if the Middle Kingdom had remained truly eternal, connecting ancient China directly to the modern world through 3,000 years of unbroken continuity? Some empires fall to conquerors, others fall to time itself. But what happens when an empire finds a way to conquer time?